In the meantime, thanks everyone for joining. And also thanks, Vic, for like driving these community office hours for the APAC region over the last several months. It's great to know that you already have a community and now I get to crash it.
I'm sure it'll be a lot more fun having you around, so it'll be great. Yeah, we have loyal sort of attendees, so I can see in there, so it'll be good. Luke has been always looking forward to my waiting music usually at the beginning, and can see a few people as well. Nicole.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking for, maybe we can go ahead and get started. What I'm thinking for this session is, since it's the first session of the new year, kind of just level set, kind of share kind of a retro look what we did last year, and what you're probably more interested in is kind of a roadmap or a sneak preview of the roadmap for Semantic Kernel. So that might take like 10 or so minutes, and then at that point, yeah, it would be great to start getting those questions that you've already started collecting. We can discuss those and see where the conversation takes us. Sound good?
Perfect.
All righty. So as many of you know, if you've been following our blogs and kind of what we've been up to, and I'm sure, Vic, you've been helping to keep everyone up to speed. Last year, kind of our big final push and hurrah was getting to V1 of the .NET version of Semantic Kernel. I'm very proud of the work that the engineering team has done, because it really does align Semantic Kernel to actual .NET patterns. For using dependency injection. We're using kind of like the things that you would expect as a .NET developer. So it's nice, instead of being laughed out of room by .NET developers who are going, oh, wow, this is actually useful and easy to use, and et cetera. So if you haven't upgraded to V1, it is a non-trivial upgrade. I'm just going to put that out there. But from what I've heard from folks that have gone through that journey, they're much, much happier on the other side. Okay. And then we also, of course, have our other languages. So I want to shout out and give them some love. I'm not sure how many of you already use the Python or Java flavors of Semantic Kernel, but as part of this quarter, so now until March, our focus is to get parity with those libraries and the .NET flavor, and we believe we'll be able to go a little bit faster than what we did with the .NET version, because we have something to copy. So we should be kind of okay on that front. We are, especially in the Python space, looking for contributors. We know if you tried to contribute in the past with Python, it was not the easiest or best experience in the world. We have a new kind of engineering team forming around Python, and one of their goals is really supporting the community during the PR process. And that really goes for the entirety of Semantic Kernel. One of our goals is to really embrace the community this next year, now, especially now that we have a solid foundation that's not going to break anymore. With V1, we have no more breaking changes. We really think it'll be easier to start accepting more contributions from the community. Okay. So that's kind of a look back of V1 of the .NET, kind of our story of how we're going to get Python and Java to the same state. What's next? So I like to bucket things into 3 areas. So if you just want to like have this ingrained to your brain, there's going to be AI connectors, memory connectors, and agents. Okay. So in the AI connector space, we've heard loud and clear from the community an interest for local models, for non-OpenAI models, for multimodal models that don't just deal with text, right? People want to bring in audio and transcribe it, or they want to generate images, right? And if you look at our repo right now, we have this really great OpenAI connector and not much else. And that's really a kind of doing a disservice for the community. And that's not for the lack of the community trying, right? Y'all have actually created a bunch of PRs for us for things like Gemini, which I'm excited about, for things like Llama. We have some folks in the community that have built things like an Olama connector that's in its own repo, the the Llama Sharp repo has an integration with Semantic Kernel. So there are things that you can use, but we as a Semantic Kernel team haven't done a really good job embracing it. And so what we are going to be doing this sprint, so the next couple of weeks, is we have an engineer tasked with coming up with a proposal on how we're actually going to support all of the different connectors we expect the community to build, and actually provide guidance and guidelines of how do we help you help us. Because the biggest challenge we have right now is when a PR comes in with like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 lines of code, it's really hard to review, right? And so we want to help the community break these things up, bring them in, and also provide just some guidance on what's the best way of, let's take Llama, for example. You can deploy Llama to Azure Azure AI, Hugging Face, locally. I'm sure there's like other places you can deploy these things. It becomes a very highly matrix problem, and we want to help the community really build these solutions scalably. So that's in the AI connector space. I want to take a pause there and see if there's any like questions. If there are particular models that you're interested in, we're still working on a prioritization, and I can bring that back to the team. And then if you want, you can also feel free to type in the chat. Okay. Alrighty. So if any models come to mind or deployment strategies, please share them in the chat. I am particularly interested in how all of you have deployed models locally, at least if you've played around with it. There are so many solutions for deploying models locally. There's like Olama, there's like a bunch of other kind of applications you can install on your computer and deploy things. Each one's subtly different. And so we really want to make the right bet. And if you have any guidance for us on the core team, we'd love to hear it. Okay, so that's AI connectors. The second area, right, I mentioned were memory connectors. So if you've been doing like basic RAG, you want to do more, or you want an easier time with Semantic Kernel. We have some memory connectors that kind of exist out of the box. They are fairly opinionated. I would say too opinionated, because they require you to have this specific schema. You can't bring your own vector memory store, for example. Then we also have another project called Kernel Memory, which is this other system that you can use to like ingest things from a bunch of different places. Each has kind of their pros and cons, right? And I frankly have had a hard time like communicating like when should you use one or the other, right? And so for the second area, what we want to do is really get a grasp on what is the story that we're going to tell folks like yourselves, like what's the very easy to follow decision matrix on what type of connector you use. And if you do choose a particular connector, that there's you aren't trapped, so you can easily kind of move from one place to the other. That still needs to be ironed out, but our initial hypothesis is ChatGPT or OpenAI actually already has their own repo that they use to power their retrieval plugin for all of their assistants and GPT's work, right? And actually, I might go ahead and just share my screen real quick just so that you'll know what I'm talking about. ChatGPT retrieval plugin, okay. And then let's go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully it doesn't freeze on me. Okay. Okay. Oh, wrong one. GitHub right here. Okay. There's a couple things that are nice about this. One, they have tons of support. Basically, anyone that is building a vector database has done PRs to get their vector database in here. So they frankly have a longer list than us, right? And because this is powering like the most used AI application out there, it gives me confidence at least that it includes the necessary capabilities for a production-ready memory solution, right? And so one of our first steps is what we want to do is map our memory interface, which is currently still marked as experimental, map it to the same interface that the ChatGPT retrieval plugin uses. One that gives us confidence that we're building an actual right interface, and we can lock it down for V1 and can guarantee that we won't have any breaking changes. And then two, the one thing I'm really excited about is then we can easily integrate the ChatGPT retrieval plugin into Semantic Kernel. So almost immediately, as soon as we integrate this within Semantic Kernel, you'll be able to use any of these vector memory stores. And probably my favorite is Llama Index. It's less a vector database than just another memory framework akin to the kernel memory. But frankly, it has way more power, right? And so we really want to arm all of you with kind of the best tools. And that includes things like Llama Index. And you should be able to bring those into Semantic Kernel. So keep an eye out for that. One, our updated interfaces for memory, our integration with the retrieval plugin, and some of the guidance that we'll provide on how to use this plugin with Semantic Kernel so that you can get some of the goodness like Llama Index. And if you have any questions or concerns about memory, again, feel free to drop in a chat or raise your hand. One of the concerns I typically get when folks initially hear this proposal is, yo, Matthew, I use C# for a reason. I like C#. It's enterprise grade, all of this goodness. This GPT chat retrieval plugin, it's all in Python. Like, you're asking me to now deploy a Python service that I don't know about that. I agree. This is going to be our first step. And then what will come afterwards is those top vector databases that pretty much everyone uses, right? Your quadrants, your Microsoft AI search, those we will still have a native baked-in integration with this Semantic Kernel, so that it helps that deployment story. Right? But one of the things I want to see is I want to be able to tell with a straight face, hey, we support all of the same vector memory stores that maybe your lane chains use. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so we talked about AI connectors, we talked about memory connectors, and the last one is agents. So this is probably the buzziest thing right now in the AI space in Microsoft. We helped kind of kickstart some of that with the AutoGen project. So if you're not familiar, AutoGen, basically you can get these two agents to talk to each other, and what they've been able to kind of demonstrate is two agents talking together that have different perspectives or different roles can actually outperform a single agent, right? And so what we want to do is kind of bake in some of those concepts directly into Semantic Kernel. And you've already kind of see us do this with our Assistance API integration, if you've been following that. I'm going to quickly share my screen again. And we're going to go to the GitHub repo. If you haven't already played with our Assistance integration, I highly recommend it. It's pretty cool stuff. Let's go ahead to go into our code. We'll go into .NET. And we'll go into the kernel syntax examples. We have a bunch of really great kernel syntax examples all around agents. And if you're kind of looking at the stuff that's happening in AutoGen and feeling kind of envious, example 71 is for you. It shows you how you can create multiple different agents. And what my favorite part of this is, because we're on the Semantic Kernel side treating agents as plugins, you can give this tool agent, or I like to think of it as the product manager agent or the PM agent, the other agents as plugins. And I'll actually talk to them, delegate tasks to them if it doesn't know how to solve something, right? So definitely check this out. This is kind of our first step in this direction. Where we want to go next is this implementation of agents is very, very tied to OpenAI assistance, which scares a lot of people, right? Especially after the craziness that happened with Sam Altman last year, right? People want to feel like they have flexibility to go to different models, right? And so what we're going to be doing with our existing agent experiment is starting to abstract it, right? allowing you to bring your own model. If you want to bring in Llama, if you want to bring in Gemini to build your assistants, you should be able to do that. And we talked about AutoGen. Someone was like, yeah, AutoGen integration. Our plan in the .NET space is we're already starting to work with the engineers in Microsoft who are building the .NET port of AutoGen. What we want to do is within Semantic Kernel provide that interface, that abstraction, a class for what is an agent powered by Semantic Kernel. And then if we're successful, if we can convince, they're already kind of on board, but the proof is in the pudding, right? The AutoGen team will then use that abstraction to build on top of. And so at least in the .NET space, Python's a whole different story. But in the .NET space, you as a developer won't have to choose. All you have to know is like, I'm using Microsoft's AI SDKs. I'll use Semantic Kernel as kind of like my workhorse. So I get visibility and responsive AI and all that good stuff like telemetry. And then I can start layering on AutoGen as kind of this way of having the different agents talk to each other, right? And that's how you'll start thinking about those two projects. So I'm excited. That's kind of the three main areas that we're going to be looking at in the first couple months. Again, that's AI connectors, memory connectors, and agents. So I've been talking quite a bit. I'm going to shut up now and see if there's any questions, comments. And Vic, you mentioned there were some questions submitted earlier on. Once we're kind of done with questions on this bit, we can migrate to those.
Personally, I'm excited about agents. So yeah, that's going to be opening up a few things for sure. I have, I guess, personal sort of question around kernel memory and the way kind of semantic kernel. So we still have semantic memory as well. As you said, what's your thought around kind of the roadmap on that? Is there a plan to kind of potentially merge them or perhaps make them? I guess it's overlapping, right, in a way. Yeah.
It is overlapping. So the immediate term goal is just getting the memory connectors within Semantic Kernel healthy. So that's like bringing in this retrieval plugin and doing that work and blah, 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 blah. Kernel memory, we think, still has value. But I'm just going to be really honest with y'all. Like, we aren't staffed to make it as production ready or enterprise ready as Semantic Kernel, right? And so we're starting to transition it. You might notice this in the way we're kind of talking about it. It's more of, we want to experiment and see what is necessary to build a really robust memory pipeline, a memory service. And what we're going to do with that information is we're going to communicate that to Azure AI Search and say, hey, this should just be baked into your service so that no other human has to think about this stuff. Right? Where I see y'all, the value of it being an open source project is y'all can still use it and provide us feedback and say, hey, these are the scenarios I would want to do with this kernel memory thing. And again, we'll take that feedback and either bake it into kernel memory so that y'all can keep using it, or we'll go to Azure AI Search or other parts of Microsoft and say, hey, this really should be part of a service. What I'm realizing, at least in the memory space, is it's very complicated, right? There's a reason why I think so many folks are gravitating towards Llama Index, because they're one of the few people that have like really kind of figured it out. And if you look at their docs, it's intense. There's a lot of moving pieces, right? And so I'm kind of our team is kind of admitting like we are probably not going to be the experts at RAG on top of these vector memory stores. And so we're now on this transition of how do we make it easy for developers like yourself to use the best. I don't want to create a closed ecosystem where y'all can't use the best, right? And this kernel memory will just serve as kind of helping us generate requirements that we can then give to other teams in Microsoft.
Can I ask a question, Vic?
Yeah.
Yeah, Thanks, Matt, for joining us. I know that it would be a little later for you. So I've got two questions, in fact. I will be presenting in one of the Microsoft AI tours this February and also NDC. So been working so much on SK and trying and struggling with the docs as well. So I do have a comment on the docs that there are a couple of examples which are super old. And when you go to the kernel syntax examples, you see that, oh, this is otherwise. But I managed to tackle all of that. The only thing which I'm struggling with is maybe you have an answer to that. That I know that Semantic Kernel .NET SDK is taking some inspiration or having a dependency on Azure OpenAI .NET SDK. And for Vision specifically, we are struggling like you only have to provide a URL for now for the Vision. It does not support the base 64 encoded string. As a result of that, you cannot go beyond 64K image. Vic was asking me for a project yesterday, and I was like, no, we can't do anything with SK right now because we are just waiting. So this is my question: that do you know when it is coming, and if it is coming soon, like from .NET SDK side? I know that it's none of the things that you can handle, but if you know, that would be awesome. The second question was around, I've just noted down. Yeah, it was around the handlebars planner examples for chat actually. So I was able to see and I was able to try handlebars planner with with the single invocation, or you can say multi invocation. But again, for chat examples, I'm struggling because when I tried that with chat, it just does not behave the way does not behave the way the normal function calling or the auto invocation is working. So these were the two questions. If you have got any answers to that.
So one, I thank you. This goes for everyone. Any feedback on docs right now is like extremely highly appreciated. People have been very vocal on it's not great. And for the few folks that I've been able to talk to kind of one-on-one, they've been providing some really great feedback. The bit that I have taken to heart is right now our docs kind of conflate conceptual information with like a tutorial. It's trying to do both at the same time, which means both suffer. Like you don't get a really good conceptual doc and you have a really shitty tutorial, right? So what we're doing right now is we're separating those. We just kind of finalize out what we think are like the canonical samples / tutorials to provide. So expect over the next like week or so, our docs will start seeing a restructuring so that's separating these things out. So hopefully it's easy to read, fingers crossed. And if not, keep yelling at me until it's good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The conceptual part was like on the spot. And that's why I started myself as reading through those docs as well, because if I'm reading through those, then only I can refer others to read the docs. But yes, examples are shaky.
Yep, exactly. So keep providing feedback. We are listening. It keeps me up at night. So thank you. Your first actual question was around I'm blanking.
The GPT for Turbo with Vision.
So I don't have a good answer for that one, unfortunately. I'll probably need to follow up and maybe follow up with you on the side or kind of report back during the next office hours. I think that's all I can really say right now. There are some other kind of issues we're having with the Azure OpenAI SDK. And I guess what we've learned is if there's any new features from OpenAI, our current dependency on Azure OpenAI SDK does mean we have to wait longer. And we've heard from the community that this is very painful. We have had discussions of there's an open source version in .NET that directly hits the OpenAI API endpoints. That is an option. We've been afraid of uptaking it because one of our value props is it's all inside of Microsoft packages. You can trust us. But if that's something that interests you, perhaps I'll create an issue and y'all can start upvoting it. And if it raises to the top, maybe we invest in that space. So don't have a good answer for you. We're feeling the pain, and I know other customers are feeling the pain, and we're going to keep applying pressure to that team. The second question you had was around the handlebars planner and how to more treat it like auto function calling inside of a chat experience. This question came up in the earlier office hours as well. Kind of what I shared is where I imagine a lot of these planners evolving is plugins themselves. So right now we've provided these like generic, like monolithic planners like handlebars and like the stepwise one, right? And I think those will still exist, right? And you'll still be able to use them. But my expectation is you'll probably want to do some fine tuning of the prompt or the goal, or maybe even parts of those prompts once we allow you to customize them to tackle specific problems. So you might have a handlebars planner that has been fine tuned for answering emails or creating tasks or doing something with a subset of tools, right? And where I imagine this going is you'll package that up as a plugin, and then you can give that plugin to a chat completion, and it can use auto function calling, right? So you might create 5 different flavors of the handlebars planner, one for each different type of scenario, create them as a plugin, and then that chat experience will automatically invoke those things in order for that plan to actually generate work and do that thing. So that's where I'm imagining it going, and where I've had the greatest success integrating these chat history threads with planners. And yeah, I guess I'd love to get your feedback on if you think that's an appropriate direction, or if you were expecting something different.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I was just thinking that if we were to just make one more tier of it, or like one more tree branch of it, would it not slow or make it slower? But if it does not, I'll give it a shot rather than like just talking conceptually about it. I also had, sorry, yeah, go on.
Well, I was just going to like say, yes, I think that's a valid concern. I think it depends on kind of like what your app is doing. Where I imagine really complex and mature apps being is you're going to have to do this multi-tiered thing anyway. Otherwise, the LLMs are going to become overwhelmed and start hallucinating, right? So I think we're going to be forced to do this anyway. But I think you're right. There's some awkward period where you're not asking the LLM to do much, and by adding this extra call, you're going to slow things down. So I agree. We might have to come up with a better solution for those types of scenarios.
All right. Yeah. Just one last question. Sorry. And then I won't take any of your time. The last, which I just recently, like yesterday, noticed. I was working with GPT-4 Turbo and GPT-4 models, just considering like they were fast, they were good. But interestingly, when I switched them to like 3.5, the last one, it was like lightning fast and much more faster than GPT-4, especially with SK. When I'm using just with .NET SDK, it was okay-ish, not super fast again, but faster. However, when I was creating when I was running just my Jupyter notebook with GPT-4 model, it was taking a time for auto function calling, or you can say the stepwise planner. Sorry, the new action planner, which is invocation. So it is taking a lot of time. A lot of time means like 5 seconds to process, whereas the 3.5 is taking like less than a second to process, I would say. And that's why, and this, the reason why I tried this, because when I was not running Chat Copilot in my machine, but when I started running Chat Copilot, it was giving me very fast results. And I was like, why it is giving me fast results as opposed to my vanilla application, which has like just 3 functions. And when I compared everything, and I realized that, okay, fine, this is using 3.5, I should also use this. And as soon as I started using it, it started giving me very, very faster results. Is it something like known to you that GPT-4 is performing slower, or is it unknown, or it is just happening with me?
No. So as you go up to the bigger and bigger models, they do take longer to both process incoming tokens and outgoing tokens. So I would expect different speeds, right? What I wouldn't expect is like different speeds for the same model using the Azure SDK versus Semantic Kernel. So if that's actually happening, if we're introducing some lag, please create an issue. Please let us know like something's wrong. Like, that shouldn't happen. But in terms of different models, yes, the smaller the model, not only is it faster, it's going to be cheaper, right? Now, because of that, kind of the recommendation I give customers is for your POCs, for trying things out to see what's possible, to keep your sanity, I recommend people starting with like the beefier model, so your GPT-4. But as you start moving closer and closer to production and rolling out to more and more people where things like latency really, really matter, that's when moving down to a 3.5 turbo is really important, right? And that does, because remember, it's not as capable, it does require more prompt engineering or fine tuning or whatever the technique is to make that work just as good, or at least close enough as the GPT-4 version. So I say all that. One of the things that we recommended very early on when using Semantic Kernel, which I think pushed a lot of people to GTB4, was to use any of our planners. You kind of were forced to use GTB4. And our old planners, they frankly did, right? Because they were so complex that if you use 3.5, it just hallucinated out the wazoo. And I think that's still kind of true with the handlebars planner. As you use planners, though, that use function calling, so our new stepwise planner, or if you just use automatic function calling, because function calling is baked natively into the model, what we have found is the need for GTB4 is much less. And you can get away with 3.5 turbo in order to do some of this automation or function calling. To me, this is super exciting because it means technology that's been out for like forever is good enough. It's faster, it's cheaper, and we can save the cost and slowness for GTB4 for more advanced things. So yes, I highly recommend everyone on this call just see what happens. Use 3.5 turbo every once in a while. It might do awfully, but at least you'll know. At least you'll know what it can and cannot do. Great question.
Thanks.
All righty. Thank you, Vic, for dropping in those links to issues for the Azure SDK pieces.
Yep. And I just want to mention as well, I think there was a really good presentation from Andrich Karpathy around sort of good practices around how you would try kind of the most expensive model first at the beginning and just really test the capabilities and then do the optimization with a lower model. I'll just drop the link as well. It's a YouTube thing.
Thank you.
If I can go next, I have a few questions.
Go for it.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So I'm my team is new to Semantic Kernel, and we have been working on a Copilot project, like where we have 3 plugins. So the first plugin is generate a KQL query on the fly. The second one is call the corresponding repository, get the data. Third one is summarizing the result. So these 3 are the plugins I have. So I'm using a function calling stepwise planner to identify the right plugins or sequence. The first question is like, is there a way to know what steps it's creating? Like, what is the sequence of steps the function calling stepwise planner creates? Because I see handlebar, it provides a step, like while I debug and all, like I was able to see those. I was wondering if there is a support like where I can see what steps it's generating and I can log it somewhere. That would be my first question. The second one is like, so I have 3 plugins, right? So, and I use Azure OpenAI chat completion service, it's part of my kernel builder. So whenever a plugin gets invoked, I see a entry like in the log. For every plugin calls, there is a Azure OpenAI chat completion service entry there. Is it necessary? Because that's consuming a lot of time, like even for the smallest request, right? It's adding up like 15 to 20 seconds on top of the actual user request. So is there a way to save? And if not, like I was curious, like is there a way to know, like is there a way to log, like what is the request and response it's processing inside? Because we know, like from our service, like we are able to track all the request and responses. Once it goes to the chat completion service, right? I don't know what's happening. It's like a black box to me. Like, is there a way to log like what's happening there? So those are all my questions.
Yeah, for sure. So, kind of the first and second, they're kind of similar. Like you just want some visibility into what this
Right,
thing is.
right. It's all about logging.
Yeah. So, I'm assuming you're using the .NET flavor. We have, I'm gonna pull up the sample. We have this whole eventing infrastructure. Let's see if I can find it. Maybe it's called hooks. Here we go. It is going to be going through some updates, so expect this to change in the next couple weeks. I'm going to paste that in. Ooh, that pasted wrong. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just so we can take a look at this together. So one of the important things that we wanted to do is, no matter what the kernel is doing, we want to make sure that you have that visibility that you're wanting. You're talking about for using this for logging, but we've also seen that it's really important for responsible AI. So check what's being sent to the model, and if something's wrong, like cancel it, stop it. If something requires extra approval, again, stop it, right? So if we take a look at this sample, you can start to see how we achieve that, and that's through these events. We have 4 available right now. One is when the function is first invoked or being invoked. You can then check inside of it and see, hey, what are the parameters that are being sent to it? The function invoked, so past tense, is actually the result of the function. So with these two, you can start investigating like what's the input and output of your function or plugin. And then we also have, I believe, we also have some hooks for when the prompt is being rendered or rendering. I don't know if you're using semantic functions or, sorry, prompt functions, but if you do, we also provide those hooks. That would be my guidance for starting to get that visibility that you can then add to your logging system and see what's kind of going on.
I see. Okay.
The other nice thing, I don't know if I have a good example to point you to. This might have to be a follow-up. We've done some enhancement to our like out-of-the-box telemetry, and so if you connect the out-of-the-box semantic kernel telemetry to like an App Insights or another telemetry service, you can actually start creating. I wish I could show you a demo of this. You can actually start creating like Gantt charts of like, oh, this is the planner, and these are the sub functions that are being called in the order that they're being called. Perhaps next time we have this sync, I can come with a demo to show you what that looks like. I think that would also address some of your needs.
Oh, that's great, actually.
Okay. In terms of your other question, do you need to make an LLM call every single time you want to call a function? That's kind of the nature of the stepwise planner. The ask is for the LLM to like come up with every single step. It sees what the result is and calls the next one, right? There are some strategies that I would recommend folks on this call to use in order to minimize those number of round trips, because they add up. You called out like slow. it also costs real money, right? And so how can you minimize those round trips? So with the latest model, so the model that OpenAI released in November, so the 11.06 models, I think they're still in preview. They come with what's called parallel function calling. So when you ask the LLM, hey, what function to call, it can actually return 2, 3, 4, multiple functions that can be called in parallel. So that's nice. Definitely reduces those number of round trips. If you can upgrade, highly, highly recommend it. What I heard from your plugins, though, is that might not be possible because it sounds like some of these things have to be like sequential. They have to happen like one after the other. So you can't necessarily parallel them. In those cases, coming up with some sort of heuristics or templatizing your prompts, it sounds like some of them, perhaps like you always call the same plugin at the beginning, or it's always in the same order or steps. If there's a way to programmatically call a bunch of these things serially or parallelizably, I'm making up words at this point, but if you can do that, if you can figure out like, how do I write this in native code to start combining these things? I've seen people have luck create these higher order plugins that call plugins underneath it. And so now what you're giving the stepwise planner is not a bunch of like tiny little atomic operations. You're giving it larger operations so that it has to do fewer round trips. And what I have found is the more you abstract, the more you create these higher order plugins, the more it's kind of like a actual task a human would do, right? Like you wouldn't ask a user, hey, call this API to get this like esoteric information and then do a join with this other table, right? Like that's not typical stuff that we talk about, but we might say, hey, go ahead and get the customer and their recent sales history, right? And when you start making your plugin sound more like human language or things humans would do, that means that they sound and look more like chat conversations, which means it models more closely the data that these foundational models were trained on, right? And so I found that the more humanesque you make your plugins, the better the models are actually able to use them. And giving them very fine-grained API endpoints is actually asking the models to do something they weren't necessarily trained all that well to do. So those would be, I guess, my 3 recommendations. So in summary, use the latest model for parallelization if you can. Number 2, try to templatize things into the prompt if you can. And then 3, if you can start creating higher order plugins that don't require as many individual atomic calls, you'll avoid round trips and you'll probably have fewer hallucinations as well.
Got it. Thanks, man.
For sure. Hopefully that
Cool.
helped.
James,
Could I ask
I think
a
James,
question?
you have a question.
Go
ahead.
Cool. Could I share my screen? I've got some slides to give some context around
Yeah. Let's do
what
it.
I'm working on. I think this will work. All right, cool. So my name is James Higgy. I'm based in Australia, so I like emus. So what I'm working on is I'm calling Project Emu. So I work for Seek. Seek's a time series analytics tool for engineers, operators, and SMEs in industrial and manufacturing sectors. So I'm in the applied research team. We're looking at Gen AI. We're starting with chat assistants that we're having in our products, so the customers can learn how to use our products quicker. And we're starting to use SK applications for action assistance, starting just with a basic planner that goes through a user can ask to, okay, I want to smooth my temperature curve of my heat exchanger. And it will go, you just say, smooth my temperature. And it uses a basic planner with a bunch of different plugins to our SDK to then achieve that analytics goal that customer is wanting. Another example is show me when this temperature or this wet bulb temperature is above or below a certain point. And again, it will just create that in the background and then serve that to the user in our UI. The user can then go and interrogate exactly what has happened and modify things if the basic planner hasn't got it right. So the next thing that we want to start doing is even more complex multi-step tasks. And this is where I'm interested in the stepwise planner. So we're going through and experimenting with this with just a simple goal that the user can say, okay, cleanse my signals. And the stepwise plan has to go through, look at the signals, think about, okay, what do I need to do for each piece of data? Here, it's removed the outlier, it's smoothed the signal, and here it's closed the gap in the signal. And then beyond that, it can do even more complex tasks like, is my valve leaking? It will look at if the flow rate is above 0 when the valve string signal is closed, various things like that. So I've been able to see the thought, action, observation steps as the planner is going through, just based on logging. But I found it quite hard to serve it to the user in a UI because we want it to be quite transparent to the user so they can see the step that the action assistant is going through and either pause it, interrupt, add further clarification to the assistant, and then resume it again. So I've kind of found in there, I want the action text. I want to be able to serve that to the UI. And I think it's very similar to the previous question. So if there was a way to put a hook within the stepwise planner and grab the action text so we can start getting thought, action, and observations, that'd be really, really great.
Yeah, okay, and you're in Python land. Okay, let's see.
Yes, I am, yeah.
I could have... I was creating the backlog for Python, and I noticed that a community member had merged in kind of a V1 of hooks. I'm just seeing if I can pull that up real quick. It doesn't look like we have an example. That blows. Okay, let's see. This is definitely on our roadmap, but as you kind of saw,
okay,
we have
cool.
Net flavor, and now we need to just port it over to Python to create that visibility. And you're definitely doing the right thing. I think we talked about latency, being able to show this is what it's thinking, doing it provides tremendous value. I might need to follow up with you and see if I can find it.
Yeah, I found a hack to be able to just like grab the logs and then serve the logs to the UI, but we have a bunch of other logs going to it as well, and it gets real messy.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun at all. Okay, I think I found it. Okay, so I found the PR. I'm pasting it in without even looking at if it actually solves your problem. So now let's see if it actually solves your problem. Okay.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, pre-post, run async handlers. Okay, we have things. Let's see, is there a sample somewhere? Okay, so there's a function invoked and function event now.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's a test. Okay, let's see how this test works. So it does look like, oh, you add it to each function. So there's like a function, you create the function, and then the function has a property called invoke or invoked async. And that allows you to put in is there this invoking handler? Invoke handler. So in the interest of not wasting everyone's time, I'll probably pause here. It looks like we might have that functionality. It doesn't look like it's mapped one-to-one with .NET, so there's definitely some additional investment that we have to do to get this up to snuff. But you may be able to use what's there today so that you're not having to use the logs like you are right now.
Yeah. Would that just give me the output of the functions that are called by it? And would that also include the observations and the thoughts of those, the outputs of the skills or the plugins as well? So that was my understanding of it when I first read these function invoked.
So there's invoked, which is at the beginning. So that's going to get you the input. Invoking shows you the end, so that you should get the full result. So you should get the you should get all of the metadata here. The thing that I'm kind of like thinking in the back of my head is it looks like this, it forces the developer to attach it to a specific function, and you might not have access to the function you need to add hooks to because it's internal to the planner. So that might be the challenge with this implementation that we solved in the .NET flavor. So I'm kind of thinking out loud. So you might be able to use this. I'm starting to think that there's a critical gap that's missing before you can really take a dependency. I would expect, kind of at the rate we're going right now, maybe in like a month's time, month-ish, we'll have that inside of the Python library.
Yeah, cool. Awesome, thanks.
For sure.
Then Matthew, you want to mention there is a Python focus meeting as well?
Yes. So it's a bad time for this audience. So we do have what we're calling development office hours, where folks can come if they want to contribute to either the Java SDK or the Python SDK. It's currently more of a Europe and US friendly time. I guess my ask for this audience is if you do want to be more involved in actually contributing back to the SDK, please let Vic know, please let myself know. And if there's enough folks, maybe we set up a more APAC friendly time. I also want to use this as a segue as how do you actually connect with us? So obviously, I think a lot of you follow Vic on LinkedIn and kind of hearted his stuff, and that's a great way of reaching out. I try to be active on Discord. I'm not always there, but I try to be there, so that's another way to connect. For office hours in particular, though, we have created a distribution group. We haven't blogged about this yet, but it's coming. I'm going to put it in the chat. And the reason why we created this is if you do have questions that you want devoted time for, or if you have something really cool to demo. So James, I don't know about the rest of the folks on the call, but I was like super impressed with what you just showed in your application.
Thank you.
Hot damn, that's cool. That's kind of like AI actually helping drive productivity. If other folks on the call, if you want a venue for showing all the great work that you've done, send us a note in the SK office hours alias email address, and we can go ahead and reserve and book some time for you. As an FYI, I didn't mention at the top of this call, so I don't want to spring this on anyone, so I probably won't post this publicly. Our plan is to record all of these sessions and put them up on our blog so that they're publicly accessible. I didn't do a good job at the beginning saying that was the case, so I'm not going to post this one publicly. So if you shared anything, James, if you didn't want your competitors to know, don't worry, we're not going to post this, at least this one.
It's fine. My boss heavily redacted the original presentation. This is version 2.
Okay, so James, if you're okay with it, then if you are uncomfortable with us posting this publicly, let us know in the chat. But I might, if James is okay, then we'll go ahead and do that. But yeah, if you have something that you want to kind of get out there, this can be one venue to say, hey, this is the cool stuff I'm doing in the AI space, and then we'll post it out there. Okay. Alrighty. Any other questions, Vic? Do you have, since I'm crashing y'all's party, are there other typical things that you like to do during this time?
Yeah, I think I've got a question from the form. This is the previous way of connecting. Now we've got an email. There's a question from Venkat. He says, I would like to see RAG structure using SK, like using Azure AI Search existing indexes, different search types like full text or vector search, and also how we can control over the response format. I guess we can probably point to the kernel memory or.
Yeah, so we should probably point to those existing projects. I mentioned those 3 areas that we're investing in, and that second one was memory. I was talking to our engineering team, and we're like, okay, like I think a customer asked too, was like, oh, where's our canonical RAG example of semantic kernel? And we're like, oh my god, there isn't one. So one of the first things that we're going to be doing is we're going to build a canonical RAG sample on top of semantic kernel. Like, oh my god, the thought. And so that'll be part of our samples. Again, we know that the docs need additional love. Please give us feedback on samples that you want to see, and we'll get it prioritized. But that right there, a RAG sample is currently at the very, very tippity top of the list. So expect that in a couple weeks.
Perfect.
And you said was there another question or email, or is that the only one?
No, that's it. Got Oh, let's see if there's any.
Hi, my name is Jonathan. So working on basically co-pilot for an FMCG software vendor. So got a couple of questions. One of them is we've basically developed 2 plugins. One is an SQL query plugin, and one is for more like data analytics, and so that it's able to pick up data from the database and so on. And both, there's kind of overlap, I guess, between them, and then especially trying to get the planner to pick the right one. I mean, I've changed like the descriptions and so on, but I think previously I also mentioned ways to templatize it and so on. Or I mean, is there a way to provide examples so that they can better differentiate between the 2 plugins? Or yeah.
Great question. So our current planners today, like if you look at our handlebars planner, it has an example of like how to create a handlebars plan. And the sad thing is you cannot change that, right? And so kind of the top of our backlog for planners is to take each of the different sections of the planner and make them customizable. And you kind of hit the nail on the head on why we want to do that. Is so that if you want to use something like the handlebars planner and it's just not behaving as well as it should, you could then go into the sample section and override it and say, oh, I'm actually going to use samples from my own plugins. I'm going to have some few shot examples. So we know that's a need, an ask. In the meantime, what I do personally is you can kind of do, I call them prompt injection attacks. So within like, the descriptions of the plugins, I will like inject in some samples. I will inject in some information that probably shouldn't be in the description, but I put it there anyway because there's not a better place for it. So those are some hacks that I do to kind of get around the fact that not everything is customizable like it should be. But we are aware of the problem, and we want to give those knobs so that you can fine tune the prompts that our planners use.
Okay. All right, thanks. And second one is more like if we were to implement something like a human in the middle scenario. So then the hooks that you talked about earlier, would that be able to basically like interrupt the planner or get it to seek for something in between, seek for like a user approval of
so
whether or not the order is correct? Yeah.
So for me, there's like 2 scenarios where you'd want like human in the loop. So the first one is like you ask the LLM to do a task and the LLM doesn't know if it has all the required information to do the next step. To me, that's the value of kind of the automatic function calling. It's not really using planners, it's just the automatic function calling, because the LLMs are smart enough to go, oh, to call this plugin, I need these 3 bits of information. I'm missing the customer ID, and I'm going to ask for the customer ID. And that's a good way of having this back and forth. What you described, though, is there's also this need for some plugins to require approval or to like hard rules, like you need to include a human. In those cases, yes, I think hooks are kind of the best way of doing it. You can apply a hook to whatever those functions are, OpenAI has this concept of consequential actions or consequential functions. And what they do is if you mark it as consequential, it'll force a human to approve before that function is called by the LLM. And in the same way, you can replicate that behavior using hooks. Basically go, oh, this function's being invoked. I'm going to hard code in some logic to force a human to make sure that something bad doesn't happen.
Perfect. Thanks.
I think DSR, you got the very last question. I know we're already 1 minute above it. Plan around prompt flow and semantic kernel. Is there any kind of integration plan in the future?
Good question. So in our docs, we kind of talked about how you can use semantic kernel with prompt flow and with the broader kind of AI Studio ecosystem. All of that uses Python as just like as an FYI. And so it is using our Python SDK. And as you kind of got from this conversation, it is behind, and we're trying to rapidly evolve it and get it to a healthy state. So actually, I think the prompt flow folks, they're based in China, and so they've just recently woken up and they're pinging me right now, going, hey, your Python SDK is really behind. You need to update this thing. So that's kind of what our partnership looks like today. Our goal is to get parity with the Python so that they can take a deeper dependency on us and we can blog and have more tutorials and what have you. And then once we're at that point, our hope is, of course, within prompt flow, you should be able to bring in semantic kernel. During Ignite, we showed like a drop down of actually dropping in planners directly as nodes or tools inside of prompt flow. Is pretty cool. So we'll definitely invest in that area. And then the other thing that's really top of mind for the AI Studio group is how do they also participate in this agent story? And so we're in early conversations of how you can build an agent with semantic kernel and then deploy and evaluate it using AI Studio. All very early, but we are in talks, and the plan is to more tightly, deeply integrate these products over time.
Okay. Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew.
Alrighty. So as Vic mentioned, we are over, and I want to be conscious of everyone's time. It was a pleasure. I want to keep showing up to these things until Vic says, go away. We don't want you anymore. But hopefully y'all enjoyed my company. And hopefully I was able to at least adequately answer most of y'all's questions during this conversation.
More than anything, yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Matthew, and everyone for joining.
Alrighty. Cheers. Bye.